Hello you guys, it's Katie and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be sharing my tips for beginner crocheters. So my first tip is to use chunkier yarn and bigger hooks when you're first starting out. Now my reasoning for this is because it's easier to see the stitches you're doing when you use bigger yarn and bigger hooks. So as an example, and so you guys know what you're going to see later in the video, I'm working on a baby blanket, and for that blanket I'm using a 10mm crochet hook, and I'm using Burnett Pop Bulky yarn in the color Zesty Gray. But this yarn is a thicker yarn, and then this hook is much bigger than the normal one. And this just helps so you can see what you're doing better. I'd also suggest one of these stitch counters. So the way it works is you push this down and it counts up. And then there's a lock and an unlock. So if I don't want it to move the numbers, I'll put the lock on. If I do want to move the numbers, then I unlock it. And then I can also change the numbers on the side this way to make it quicker. So this is really handy, and it has a little hole here so you can loop some yarn or something through it and you can hang it around your neck or do something like that. That way as you're crocheting you can just go and click it and know what row you're on. And knowing what row you're on is very important. That way you don't get confused or repeat something or miss something. Now the next thing I want to suggest is getting a tape measure. This will really help because you could use a ruler like this, but this is kind of small. It's only, 12 inches. So if you're looking to make something bigger than this, then you'll have to do this multiple times and hope that you get it correct. Versus if you have a tape measure like this, then you'll know exactly how long it is and it goes out really far. So this really helps, and this I actually got with a sewing kit, but of course you can get them online anywhere, and all the stuff I'm talking about, as long as I can find it, will be linked in the description box. But this is just something that's really helped me, because let's say you're making a baby blanket and you look up online that a baby blanket on average is like 30 inches by, 45 or whatever. I'm just making that up. But let's say you want it to be that size. You'll need this to know how long you're doing it for. And even if you're following a pattern, sometimes you want it to be bigger or smaller than the pattern has it being. So you can use this to make sure. And a pattern might say chain until 30 inches, or it might say do single crochets every row until it's 40 inches, and then you'll need something like that. And you can get those pretty cheap as well. Now that I've talked about some products that are really useful, I'm now going to give you some tips and show myself crocheting. So I have my baby blanket started here, and another tip that I have for you guys is to use a stitch marker like this. These are just tiny stitch markers for when you're crocheting, especially if you're crocheting in a circle, then you need stitch markers. That way you'll know when you're starting a new round. So these are really helpful. I suggest getting these for any crocheter, but especially if you're a beginner, because it's really hard to keep track of your rows or your rounds sometimes. These are really helpful, and I suggest getting them for any crocheter because they're really helpful for remembering where you stopped your row or your round. So, but my big use that I use these for is when I'm done crocheting. Like, I normally crochet in bed at night, and I leave my crochet projects in my bed, which is probably a bad habit, but to make sure my stitches don't come undone, I take the stitch marker and I insert it into the last stitch that I just did, and I just make sure it is clamped like that. And then you can leave it like this, and the next day or whenever you come back to this project, you can just take it out like this and then get your hook and you can insert it in here and start crocheting. And as you can see, with this bigger hook and this thicker yarn, it is much easier for me to see where I'm going. So as a beginner, I know for me, it took a long time to figure out where I'm supposed to put the next stitch. But when it's bigger yarn like this, you can easily see that there's a hole right here, and this is where my next stitch needs to go. Versus if the stitches were smaller, it would be much harder to figure out where the next stitch is supposed to go. But when it's bigger yarn and a bigger hook, I can easily, even if I need to, pull it apart a little bit and say, okay, this is where the next one goes. So again, now that I'm going to be done with this stitch, I will pull the loop a little bit bigger. And now you could leave it this way, but you take the chance of it coming out. So I'm going to use this tip that I just showed you guys, where I just put the stitch marker on this loop here, and then I can tighten it as much as I want to, loosen it as much as I want to. If you have siblings or little kids around your house that will take the chance of messing with it, this is really helpful because you'll make sure that you don't get all your stitches pulled out. And I just pulled on it so hard that this came undone. But, you know, if you have a little kid that's going to mess with your yarn ball, then this is really helpful. Or even for myself, I don't have any little kids in my house, but I find my cats coming over to me all the time when I'm trying to crochet. Once I see it's moving, they come over and try to attack it, which is really cute and all, but I would rather my stitches not come undone, so using this really helps. So another tip, this might seem obvious, especially if you crocheted before, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows this tip because it really helps. And I didn't know this in the beginning either. If you use from the inside of the yarn instead of trying to find the outside around here, it comes out automatically and you can pull it pretty easily, versus if you're using it from around the ball, then you have to, the ball is rolling like this all the time, and it is much more difficult to keep a handle on it. Versus this, I can just keep this over here and I can constantly pull and it's constantly coming out. And I just wanted to show you guys this again because I did talk about this earlier, but I wanted to make sure that you guys could see it well because I don't think you could see it well when I was trying to show you earlier. So I'm on row 10 currently, but once I finish this row, I will click it like this and then I'm on 11, and then I'll click it and I'm on 12. If I need to go back, let's say I did this row completely wrong and I have to take it out, I can easily move it like this, and then I'm back at 10. And let's say I've already started my project and I'm like, oh, I should probably start counting the rows. Let's say I'm already on row 20, I can easily move it like that. And the great thing about this, let me put it back to 10. That way I remembered that I was on row 10. But the great thing about this as well, if you have kids or anyone that's gonna mess with your stuff, you can put it on lock. And that way, when you do this or mess with any of the things, it's not going to change the number you're on. So that way, once you're ready for it, you can unlock it, but you can keep it on lock as well. That way, it will not change if someone messes with it. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a hole here, so you could take a piece of your yarn, insert it through, and make a little necklace, or you can just keep this to the side as you're working, and every time you're done with a row, you just click it. Very convenient in my opinion. But if you're just trying out crocheting, you probably don't want to spend money on things like this, right? Because this, I mean, it's a nice thing to have, but it's also not necessarily needed. So let me show you before I had this the way I did it. And it's very simple. I mean, it's almost self-explanatory. But I have a pencil and I have some sticky notes. And I'm on row 10 currently. So I literally just make tally marks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm on 10. Now with tally marks, the way I would normally do it is I'm on 10, but I haven't completed 10. So once I complete 10, then I would do this. Versus with this, I normally click it for the row I'm on. It's just personal preference though, it really doesn't matter. But when I used to do tally marks, I would make a tally whenever I finished the row. Like I said, personal preference. When you're working on row 10, you could have 10. Or you could have 9 while you're working on 10 until you're done with 10. Either way, for me, just visually having 9 while I was working on 10 and then putting a dash when I completed 10 made more sense to me. And then seeing the number 10 and saying, okay, I'm on 10 with this made more sense to me. But as I said, personal preference. Also, just a reminder that this crochet pattern will be up on Wednesday of the week you're watching this. So this video that you're watching goes up on Friday, and this pattern is going up on Wednesday. So make sure that you check this out if you're interested in seeing it. It is a baby blanket for beginners, and it will be on my Etsy shop, so you all can check it out. So one thing that I wanted to make clear to you guys is that you don't need to go out and buy all these materials. These are things that I've accumulated over a year and a half or so of crocheting, and I have really found these products helpful. You don't need to go out and get a stitch counter or a yarn needle that's super expensive. You can simply use tally marks and find plastic ones that are much cheaper and use things that you already have. So like I was saying with the measuring tape, if you already have a ruler, use that. I don't want you guys to go out and buy a bunch of crochet products and then not even end up liking crocheting. So I would say crochet for a few months with the stuff you have. Maybe buy 1 or 2 things if you really think that you're going to continue with it, but I wouldn't invest in stuff like this until you really know that you're going to continue with it. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more from me, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on post notifications. That way you'll know every time I upload a video. If you'd like to see regular updates from me, or check out my Etsy products, my Etsy shop and social media accounts are all linked in the description box below. And I upload on this YouTube channel every Friday, and I post a new Etsy product every Wednesday. And I thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!